Afternoon. As many of you probably have figured out by now, your Columbus Rotary program continues to try and bring you the best speakers every Monday. We try and mix business issues with business leaders with interesting information about local companies. Last week, I was fascinated to learn a lot of new things about IGS from Jim Bache, their COO, who's a friend of mine. Today, we get to learn about National Church Residences, NCR, which is a huge employer, not only here in town, but across the country. And maybe an organization you're not familiar with. I met Mark Ricketts probably about 20 years ago when Ohio State Hospitals had a young professionals board. I always wondered if he would ever amount to anything since he was an accountant. It looks like he has. Congratulations, Mark. Mark recently became the CEO of NCR, and today we get to learn about his company and his vision for the future. Keeping in mind about visions and remembering that it is now 2015, I once when I was talking to Mark about coming today, I asked him, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And he responded, I don't know yet because I don't have 20/20 vision. I'll let those of you that didn't understand have that get explained to you by the person next to you who understood it. Today, Mark will discuss the issues facing seniors and their families as baby boomers become the silver tsunami. NCR is the largest not-for-profit provider of affordable senior housing in the country with 340 communities. Prior to NCR, Mark worked for Rockbridge Capital and Arshot Investment Corporation, but his best-known quality is he's a Miami University grad. Was a Phi Psi there, and I was a Kappa Sig, but are there any Phi Kappa Psis in the audience by chance? Mark, any of your fraternity brothers? No Phi Psis? Oh, well. Well, let's welcome Mark Ricketts to Columbus Rotary.
I must admit, I have been in this building many, many times. I don't know when you made the big switch, but my dad was an Upper Arlington Rotarian, and they met in this room till I think maybe the last 6 months. You all made the switch. What a joy it is to come and speak with you all. I'm going to be talking about a subject that most people don't like talking about the possibility of getting old. You know that? The last time I checked, we're all headed there. You know that? There's not a stop. So as I share with you, I hope that you'll engage with me about a topic that America doesn't like talking about. And I'm going to try and educate you, help you see what National Church Residences is doing to help solve this problem of aging in America. And I'm going to engage you in advocacy. I'm going to ask you to become a proponent, a person who's willing to talk about this with your legislators, frankly, around your own dinner table, with loved ones, so that the issue isn't covered up. I think it's important that we talk. As I begin this talk, I'm going to kind of talk about the huge challenge that our nation is facing, frankly. The issue of demographics, I'm going to point there to the baby boomers. The issue of economics, and that's everybody knows that we're operating at a deficit in America today, and that challenge continues for the next 20 years easily. And then the idea of political will. Our nation's ability or willingness to take on this topic and try and solve it over the long term. I tell you, the answer that I've heard most commonly given to this is at least we got to start bending the curve. I'm going to show you a lot of graphs to get you educated on the topic, and I'll probably stir you up a little bit with a story or two so it's not totally boring. Before I jump in, I will tell you that I spent most of my career working in downtown Columbus. I came to Columbus post-college. I am an accountant, and I heard a guy whose last name was Zid, and I remember there was a Jim Zid. Is that your dad? How about that? I interviewed with him when I came out of college. I remember him very well. I ended up taking a job with Deloitte. I was there for the first 7 or 8 years of my career and then worked with Bill and Tom Schottenstein for the next 11 as the chief financial officer for Arshot Investment. And then I went to work for Jim Pickett and David Muse and all those guys at what was called Bank One Capital. It became Stonehenge. And I spun off with a group called Rockbridge. And it was during those years that I served as a board member of National Church Residences. Loved my assignment there, 6 years of participating on the finance committee and the audit committee and listening to the mission. And when my period of time went off, my My recent boss, Tom Slemmer, called me and said, would you like to come work here? And I thought, wow, this doesn't fit at all with the career path I'm on. I'm a finance guy. How could that possibly help out in the mission of senior living? But I can tell you that in my life, prayer is important. And so I prayed about it and I really felt like God was saying, this is where you need to go. And it probably wasn't a career appropriate move at that point, but as I look at it today, 15 years later, it could not be better. I love my work. I love who I work with. There's nothing like taking your business skills and having it marry up with your spiritual gifts and have God say, this is the plan for you. Great organization, 3,300 employees. We operate in 28 states and Puerto Rico. I'll give you a little bit more information about us as we go along. This is the issue, unprecedented times. I'm going to show you, these graphs may be hard, so I'll point out what they are and talk you through them. The blue line is the aging of America. That's the age 65. I put a vertical line. That's today. So on the right-hand side of that blue vertical line is the growth in America. The green is the number of people 85 years and older, and the blue line, or the navy blue, are those 65 years and over. You can see the line increasing largely due to the baby boomers. I am at the end. If you're 69 years old in this room, you're the front end of the baby boomers, and if you're 52, you're the back end of the caboose. I'm 55, so I'm at that tail end category. When we reach age 65, many people in this room are there, you have a 70% chance of having a need for long-term care. We'll define the word long-term care as we go along, but just assume that long-term care is that cost of an aging population that's not covered by Medicare or some insurance card in your pocket, all right? I'll guide you through that. This is the look, though, of the population of 90-year-olds. 90-year-olds. The red line represents the proportion of 90-year-olds compared to 65-year-olds. The blue bar represents the number of 90-year-olds living in America. In 2010, we're looking at something around 2 million. In the year 2040, we're looking at 6 million. So we'll triple the number of seniors that are going to be the ages of 90 and over. This will make sense as we move along. And as, of course, what happens with aging is the possibility of a dementing disease, a difficult disease. I'm going to show you the big, thick graph is Alzheimer's, the great fear of Americans today. Vascular dementia, which is something we'll talk about. My dad had that. Parkinson's disease, which I heard Mr. Zid talk about, is on that graph, and other dementia. So as we live longer, somebody would say that's just great news, we're living longer. I can tell you the incidence or the concern about these difficult diseases become much more prevalent in America. So when you're 65, here's the question. What's the chance of you getting into a serious car accident? 18%. When you are 65, what's the chances that you become disabled or cognitively impaired? 44%. Not on your 65th birthday, by the way. Those 65 years and older. So you don't have to panic on that birthday. It's going to happen this year. And then the last one is chance of needing long-term care. Wonder what you'll think this is. The chances that you will need long-term care after your 65th birthday is 70%. Now, that's not fun to talk about, is it, right? Let's look at this graphically. There are only 31% of people aged 65 years and over to finish their life that will finish their life without needing, that LTSS stands for long-term support services, also called long-term care. 31% of us will escape the earth, head to heaven, without having a need for long-term supports. Boy, what a blessing that would be. 17% of it will only need that coverage or that help for 1 year. 12% will need that coverage for 1 to 2 years. 20% will need that help for more, from 2 to 5 years, and another 20% will need it for 5+ years. I'm sure you thought about this when you're developing a retirement plan, right? We all do, right? What is the cost of long-term care in America today? This number will blow you away. $363 billion a year today is spent in long-term care. And national church residences, a part of that economy. I would tell you in Columbus right now, you would see nothing short of a couple 300 home health agencies, some 180 nursing homes. It's the hidden culture you don't see in our culture, right? 2% today of our gross domestic product. You say, boy, Mark, that's a rough number. What if I told you that by 2025 that number will double? And if we go forward to 2045, it will be, what's 5? Quintuplet or something? 5 times greater. It'll be a $1.5 trillion industry, or 10% of our gross domestic product. How? Why? What's causing this? Well, we'll talk about that. The actual cost for a nursing home in America today is $90,000 a year. I wonder if that's in your retirement plan. That's a tough number, isn't it? How about this? How about if you want to stay home? Well, the average cost for an aide at home is $25 an hour. And if you happen to be in that fortunate group that could have 24-hour care at home, it would cost you $175,000 a year to have 24-hour care in your home. Those are rough numbers, aren't they? I'm going to tell you the story about this young man. This young man is Fred Ricketts. That's my father. About 5 years ago, we got back. It's been longer than that because he's been dead a year. Let's say it was 6.5 years ago. We got back from a family fishing vacation, and we were standing in the garage, and my dad said to me, he said, things aren't going right. I'm not sure I know exactly what's wrong, but I'm not thinking clearly. We knew it. We had played a game of cribbage while we'd been fishing, and that game where you go 15-2, 15-4, and a pair makes 6. You all played that before. Kind of happens quickly as you're counting cards back, and my dad could no longer play the game. He brushed it off as I guess you'd say, as only he could. If you know Fred, there are several people in the room here that do. He was telling me that things weren't going right, so I took over as a financial advisor to him, and we also talked about the medical issues involved and found out my dad was diagnosed with something called frontal lobe dementia. Those of you that know the kind of issues that dementia faces, this is not an Alzheimer's disease. It's a disorienting disease. My dad knew my name till the day he died. But he became increasingly frustrated with the order of life, could no longer tell time, didn't know what time of year it was, became unbelievably in control of his schedule, needing to be at places ridiculously early. So if Rotary began at 11:30, he needed to be here by 9:15. If he had a doctor's appointment, his doctor was Dr. Mason and then Dr. Is it Trousseau? Dussault, you all know him, the Upper Arlington practice. He needed to be there 3.5 hours early. To get to church, he'd be leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning, and my mother would just try and guide him and help him. But for him, everything became increasingly tense. And anybody that provided resistance to my dad, ultimately, he became pushy. And in fact, he became violent. And this disease is a rough one. And at some point, we had to face reality. He could no longer live at home. My dad did everything right. You can tell he was a World War II veteran, came back to Columbus after having spent years running a Boy Scout camp called the Shift Scout Reservation in New Jersey. Came back to Columbus, took a job with the Columbus Public Schools, was an industrial arts teacher, ultimately a principal at Roosevelt Junior High School. If anybody knows where Roosevelt was, at Whittier and, I can't remember the crossroad. It's been torn down now. A lot of students that graduated from Roosevelt would have gone to East or Eastmore or South. Angela Pace was in my dad's junior high school. I still enjoy seeing her and having her know my dad. My dad ultimately took a job working for Rotarian Joe Davis. Dr. Davis hired my dad to become the head of career education for the Columbus schools, and he built what were 4 and actually 5 career centers. Sadly, if you can believe it, they are all gone. Remarkable to think what's happened to the idea of career education in America. My dad saved his whole life, had state teachers retirement system, retirement benefits, and he told me in the garage that day that he had saved up $350,000. He said, your mother and I are set. A pension, she was a retired nurse, they were set, but what the numbers never considered was splitting up. The cost for somebody living in a dementia unit today is around $70,000 a year. So that $350,000 over the next 3.5 to 4 years became zero. I took my mother, I grew up in Upper Arlington, took my mother and we grabbed her purse and we got in line at the Franklin County Jobs and Family Services to sign my dad up for Medicaid. Hard to imagine when you think you do everything right that you would be in this position in life. But you see, we don't prepare in America for long-term care issues. He actually needed insurance to cover him for this risk, and we even talked about it 6 or 7 years before, and I said, oh, Dad, you're 79, you're in great shape, you don't need to worry about that. The chances of you needing this are so remote. The fastest way to become poor in America is to just grow old. Remarkable thing to think about, isn't it? Here's an interesting statistic. I'm going to tell you those blue lines going across left to right represent a certain group of population. The top line is 4% of America that retires on a retirement income of $5,000 or less. The next line will be people that retire in America with $10,000 or less retirement income. The next, those retire at less than $15,000. The big blue line is 24% of America retires with less than $25,000 of retirement income. And you would go and say, well, where does Fred Ricketts sit in this? My dad was in that absolute rich bundle at the bottom. $50,000 and more, right? And yet my dad ran out of money. Think about the rest of America who are ill-prepared for this issue of long-term care, 70% of which will need it, will need it. How do we pay for this in America today? I'm going to talk a little bit about this. That group that's the purple button up there, that represents 62% of seniors retiring at $25,000 a year or less. Here's a stunner. Upper Arlington. You study Upper Arlington right now and say, I wonder how many seniors that live in Upper Arlington today would have a retirement income of more than $50,000 and more than $350,000 in the bank. You think, well, Arlington's the most well-off suburb in Columbus. How many do you think would live there? If I told you that there is only 1,000 households in Upper Arlington that are 75 and older with $350,000 in the bank and a retirement income of more than $50,000, would that surprise you? It surprised me. It surprised me. Our nation is on its way to having a huge population of elderly poor. Not a small population. Some 65 to 75% of elders in America will be poor when they turn 75. Here's how we pay for their care if that group presents themselves with a long-term care need. I'll point out to you that the light green on the right is Medicare. 45% of Medicaid, 45% of America provides gets their long-term care supports through Medicaid, which is a benefit that is paid by the state of Ohio. I think it's 65% the state, 35% feds. 24% of the people pay with their savings. My dad paid every penny of his bill from his savings. He received his Medicaid card on the day that I returned home from the funeral service. Thank you very much, Mike. Wonderful to be able to tell my dad that he never once had to use the Medicaid money to provide for his care. 21% believe that long-term care is going to be covered by Medicare, and in fact, Medicare only covers the first 100 days, or up until that point that you are getting better. At the point that you stabilize, most Medicare providers would say, well, that's all we can pay for. We provide health care. Medicare is a health care benefit. 4% are other programs. Only 6% of people needing long-term care today pay with insurance. Doesn't that surprise you? Long-term care, private insurance, let's talk about it. Covers about 6% of our nation's annual spend. In other words, very few people hold it. Another 10% approximately 10% of the people have it. In this room, just ask a question. How many people have gone out and purchased long-term care insurance? Remarkable. We're a switch in a generation. I did the same thing too. About 3-4 years ago, I decided I'd seen enough with my dad's situation. I realized the risk that I was in. Just to show you the challenge that we have as a family, my father-in-law, who was the chief actuary at Nationwide Insurance Company, his wife developed Alzheimer's we diagnosed on her 65th birthday, and she lived 15 years at home under his care. He did it all by himself. What an interesting way to spend your retirement years. And he would tell you, most people would say, what a unbelievably sad story that is to discover your wife has Alzheimer's. But if you were to talk with Harvey, he would tell you it was a gift of God to be able to provide care back to his wife in those last 15 years. And he did that with the support of Home Health Agency, National Church Residences. So I've had the chance of seeing this twice, right? A smaller percentage in Germany, France, or Israel have this issue, but they have public finance for long-term care. I want to talk about that potential that our nation should be offering long-term care to everyone. In fact, I would say that if we allowed everybody to participate in this program, the premiums would come down dramatically. Today, there's adverse selection. The people that are buying long-term care insurance are buying it later in life, and they're buying it because their family has a need, or you have seen the impact. Premiums are expensive. Our financing system for taking care of long-term care has not changed since 1965. We have never rethought this issue. We're talking about primary care. We're talking about acute care. We're talking about medical care. But America doesn't want to enter into this idea of long-term care. What happens? How do we pay for it? About 1/3 of caregivers today have given up their career in order to step home. That means they're no longer in the workforce. They're no longer paying taxes. The great economic ride that we've been under as a nation for the last 40 years has been because we now have 2 wage earners, and we have the baby boomers paying taxes. Let's look at this diagram. This is called a population pyramid. I'm going to talk you through it, so don't worry that it's a little bit ugly. If you were to look at those lines going up, each of those represents 5-year increments of people in America. So 12% on either side. That means we have 12% males, 12% females that are in the ages 0 to 4. As you work your way up, people ages 5 to 9, it looks like it's about 11%, 10 to 14, working your way up. And if you get to the very top part at the top, you'll find that this is the workforce. 52% of America between the ages of 20 and 65 are paying for only 5% of the population, those people in retirement age. This is what you call a perfect population pyramid. There's plenty of taxpayers paying for benefits going to the people up at the upper ages. But if I push this button up here and we look at 1970, something funny happens. What is that waistline in this little diagram? And what are the hips? Anybody have a good idea? In 1970, that waistline represents the returning veterans from the foreign wars. A lot of men were killed. And when they came back, they were very active at home, and they produced a lot of kids. The gold bars at the bottom represent the baby boomers. At this point, we're looking at a senior population of about 18% and a workforce population of about 50% of population in America. But as I move up to the age, this is 2014 years ago, you now can see the baby boomers plain as day. You know what's really joyful about them right there? They are paying a serious amount of taxes. There's lots and lots of double wage earner families. Became very common in these years. So our tax base is great, and the senior population has not grown. It still only represents about 18% of America. And if I were to flash forward to the year 2030, something really ugly happens. The baby boomers hit the retirement years. They now represent 25% of our population, and the workforce now looks like a man without hips. It is one even stack. Remarkable change in the way America looks today, not only in the workforce that pays taxes, but the group at the top that are now enjoying their retirement years. If I were to tell you what's the impact going to be on America as this group ages through that system, I would tell you if it wasn't for aging, which is the red block up there, the red triangle, and if it wasn't for the fact that health care is growing well beyond the cost of inflation, then the white would represent our spending for health care in America. But the truth is that we have a remarkably large number of elders heading into the retirement years, that's the red, and we have spiraling cost of health care. And there is a lot being done, and I'm very excited about the innovation that's happened in the last 5 years, and we are participating in that in a big way. But if nothing happens, you're going to see a very ugly growth in this expense. If I were to put this on a graph that shows you our 2 big spending buttons in America, red represents all discretionary spending, and the green represents healthcare spending. In other words, we are really very stable as a nation in how we spend that red line. We are totally out of control about how to spend that green line. And if you were to lay this on a federal budget, you would tell that the revenue coming into America is that black lightning strike that's coming through on that graph. The bottom blue line represents Social Security. That's where some of our money gets spent. The light blue is Medicare and Medicaid. You can tell how that is just taking over. The next is every other program in America. We are heading into a deficit. Everything else we do, beginning the year 2050, if we do nothing else, everything we do will be cut. All we'll be paying for is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Remarkable. But what's that big, huge thing at the top? That's a deficit. That's paying interest on the deficit. In fact, if I put up all the last years from 1974 to 2004, you would tell that there's only been 4 years in the past, 50, where we actually had a positive in America. And then you can see 09, 010, 011, and 12, all those years digging out from the great crash. We have created a deficit that's just gigantic in America, and we'll be paying interest on that for years and years to come. I would tell you something must be done. So the question becomes, what do you do? Do you raise taxes on your way out of this, or do you cut spending? What are we going to do with this aging tsunami that we now doesn't have enough income, nor has set enough money aside to deal with this long-term care issue? What do we do about that that's coming forward? I'm going to challenge you. One choice that you have is to cut spending. If you were to do this in 2010, this is an old slide, if you wanted to cut your way out of it, you'd have to cut 36% of spending in America to get to a balanced budget. Or you could raise taxes, and you have to raise taxes by 50%. So those of you that are paying taxes here in a couple days, let's say your average tax was 35%. In order to get our way out of this, we'd have to take you to 47, 50% tax. If you wanted to cut your way out, we'd have to reduce the spend in America by 36%, and I can assure you, everybody in this room would feel the pain of a cut like that. But I tell you what we usually do in America, we kick that can down the road. We don't do anything about it, and so let's just wait. Let's wait till the year 2030. Then we'll solve that problem, right? At that point, you need to cut spending by 48% or increase taxes by 64%. Doing nothing is not an option. It's not an option. Anybody else that lives in the healthcare space would agree with me. Putting our head in the sand is a silly game. Unfortunately, we work on 4-year cycles in America, right? Re-election campaigns, and anything that gets solved in 4 years gets a lot of attention, but things that take 20 and 30 years to solve are a difficult subject to bring up. So I'd ask you, are we playing a dangerous game here in America? I guess I put up here financial roulette. Here is a myth. I see Parkinson's up here, so maybe Mr. Zid can help me with this. Will Medicare pay for long-term care if you get Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, or multiple sclerosis? The answer would be no. They'll provide for therapy. They would provide for doctor's visits. They'd even provide if you had a hospitalization. But if you're home on all those diseases, or if you have a need for long-term care, it's not covered. How about this? Private health insurance. Will private health insurance or disability insurance pay for long-term care if you get Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, and multiple sclerosis? No, the answer is not. Private health insurance is for health care costs, not for long-term care costs. It's specifically excluded. Here's another one. Will long-term care, boy, now we're getting close. Will long-term care insurance pay for long-term care for people with these diseases? For most people, why? Why is that no? Because only 9% of Americans have it. Long-term care would cover all of those costs, but we choose not to buy it. So to get help, what do? You got to spend all your money. And I would tell you there are certain people in America that would say the best way is to kind of make yourself poor, give your wealth away, and I would tell you there's probably even attorneys in town that would encourage you to do that. And I won't comment about that any other way than saying that Medicaid is the absolute poorest payer for everybody that's in this long-term care space. So if you elect or should choose to want to give away your resources to family members with the idea you would qualify for Medicaid sooner, I would tell you, you wouldn't want to be there. The best providers are not Medicaid providers. The reimbursement for Medicaid today for us at National Church Residences, and we do provide Medicaid level of care, but the reimbursement today causes us to lose $75 a day on every person we take on Medicaid. Why would anybody choose to care for somebody and lose $75 a day? Because it's their mission. So there are great not-for-profits that do that. But I tell you, it's extremely hard to envision how any for-profit provider can make sense of a reimbursement for Medicaid. And I would discourage that, frankly. If you wanted my opinion, I would tell you that doesn't help. Here's the middle-class dilemma. This might be my dad, and it might be somebody in your family. Only the top 5% can actually afford private pay. That means that they had enough stored away. I know in my world, I kind of think about having $300,000 to $400,000 in a pocket put away to take care of the likelihood of an event, separate and distinct from your retirement plan. Hard to imagine it would take that much, but you're trying to cover a risk. But the top 5% can afford it. The poor will get Medicaid. Ultimately, they'll be on that service. Private insurance costs too much. Most people don't choose to buy it. Middle class must use up all of their assets to get on Medicaid. We've got a dilemma, don't we? Medicaid was not built for this. When this benefit was passed, when Medicaid was first introduced some 30 or 40 years ago, it was a medical benefit provided for poor families. It has quickly been taken over by the senior population and for long-term care. It wasn't built for that. It was developed as a safety net. It has become America's default long-term care plan. If I were to ask most people in America how they're going to pay for long-term care, they said, don't worry about it, the government's got me covered. 90% of America feels that way, and it won't be there. It can't be there. 40%, it pays for 40% of long-term care in the U.S. today. I would tell you it will double if we don't do anything. Millions of people are exhausting their savings in order to take care of long-term care, and I would tell you we have record longevity coming. It's going to make it worse. You say, gee, many crowds, Ricketts, give me some good news here. Where's the joy in all of this? Well, we're not done yet. I would tell you that the state of Ohio pays for Medicaid. It represents today 25% of the state budget. And if the state did nothing, and I can assure you that our governor is doing something, but if the state did nothing, that would double in the next 15 years. Could you imagine 50% of our income taxes going to pay for a single benefit Medicaid? I can tell you that our governor has put in legislation that would limit growth in the Medicaid spend by no more than 3% a year. That's 3% of 25%. So each year it would go up about 1.5%, something like that. How in the world will the state afford Medicaid if they're only accounting for a 3% growth annually when we know it's going to double? There is no plan in the state to put everybody on Medicaid, not Medicaid living in nursing homes. Somebody's going to have to be thinking about innovation, and that's where National Church Residences comes in. I would tell you our role in this space is to innovate, begin to think about bending the curve, new ways, different ways of caring for our elders, to advocate, and you might say that's what I'm doing right now. I'm advocating and educating. We spend a lot of our time in Washington, a lot of our time here at our Capitol, talking with anybody that will listen to us about the issues of long-term care, not just health care, but long-term care, and we have a very willing audience here in the state of Ohio. We consider ourselves the innovative leader. We are the largest provider of senior living services in the United States, not-for-profit that is, and I think innovation is what we think about mostly. We can't do it the way we've been doing it for the last 30 or 40 years. We are also we serve, I guess you'd say, two ends of the spectrum. We serve the top 5%, the folks that have set their money aside and move on to retirement campus. And of course, many of you know this pillar community in Columbus, probably the most beautiful retirement center in the state of Ohio, called First Community Village in Upper Arlington. Nelson French is in this room, one of our best residents. I'll show you his home here in a second. It's a beautiful setting for that top 5% that's able to save their money. Dining facility. It's called a continuing care retirement community. That means you move on to this campus, living independently in a beautiful independent setting. Should you have the need, it's on campus. You never have to move. Is that your home, Nelson? Is it close enough? Close enough, right? We also have independent cottages, beautiful, what to me look like condos. And I think Bill Arthur is moving in that one in the back right corner. I think I know every resident lives there. My wife and I put an addition on our home, and I got to live in that community for the last 9 months. It's a wonderful place to live. We are in the continuum of care, National Church Residences. We have senior living communities like First Community Village, home and community services, adult day services, assisted living, memory care, skilled nursing, rehab. You've seen all this before, right? These are our communities for the folks in the top 5% of the categories. First community you know, Bristol Village in Waverly. Those of you that live in sports radio, we have been having all kinds of commercials on the sports channels. Legacy Village, The Glade, and we have 2 communities in Florida. But I will tell you that as you think about who we serve in the state of Ohio, some 800 people every day in adult day centers. We have 6 of them, soon to be 7. We serve about 2,500 people a day in their homes on home and community services. We have about 500 people today that live in our nursing homes, another 500 in our assisted living communities, somewhere around 850 seniors living on those beautiful retirement campuses. And we also have permanent supportive housing, which is housing for the formerly homeless. That's an entirely another subject of what we do. This is what we look like in the state of Ohio, with little buttons all over the place. But probably what has made us recognizable on a national front is the fact that we operate everywhere. We operate in, well, I can tell you, Puerto Rico is the bottom right-hand corner, and up in the upper left, that's Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Anybody's ever been to Coeur d'Alene, near Spokane? So we are operating homes for seniors everywhere, and we would tell you that the innovation that we think about every day is the innovation of housing. There's not a better intervention in somebody's health care than a great place to live, and we call that a foundation. It's a foundation for providing service for seniors. I can, in a community like this, just opened this week, that's Panola Gardens, near that big rock in Atlanta. What is that called? Stone Mountain, thank you, that big rock. Very close to that. That's very near Stone Mountain. That's a senior campus that we just opened up this week. That is a great foundation for providing services to seniors. They come in living independently. Everything's hunky-dory and great. In that campus today, we have a primary care physician coming in every single day to meet people. This is a campus right here in Dublin. This is called Avondale. Those of you that's ever been on Avery Road, it's for seniors, both cottage-style living. This is actually affordable housing. Yes, this is, in part, a subsidized community. So about 50% of the seniors living there can pay according to their ability to pay. And also includes 30 seniors that are absolutely paying a market rate of income. And they have daily supports, 1 meal a day, their apartment cleaned, and they also have laundry services and transportation. This is a campus in Washington, D.C. that we just converted from senior housing to senior living, providing health care supports. We can continually improve communities by the work that we do. I want to share with you just that the idea that we look at the idea of providing supports in the place where people call home today to be the sweet spot and bending the curve affecting seniors in America. And I will stop there and allow you to ask questions, if you have any. Do any of you have the courage to raise your hand? Yes.
Can you speak to what's going on as far as reimbursements that's making it very difficult for operators to...
Reimbursement. We call that payer mix. All of us are dealing, well, I can tell you this, it's kind of a funny statistic, but running a nursing home, let's just take First Community Village, which is a 150-bed nursing home. We have, listen to this, 890 different payer contracts. 890 to run 150 bed. That means somebody showing up, pulling a card out of their pocket. I have to figure out which of the 890 plans they're under. Can you imagine anything more difficult knowing where I'm going to admit you? It could take me 3.5 weeks to figure out that. I would tell you more and more people that come into nursing homes with a knee replacement, a hip, or a shoulder aren't carrying a Medicare card anymore. They're pulling out something we call Medicare replacement, Medicare Advantage, Medicare Part C. These are all types of coverage. That would be Aetna, Humana, Anthem. You all may have one of those if you're 65 and older. So 50% of the people that come to our community today don't carry a Medicare card anymore. They bring a replacement card. Well, that replacement card is an insurance company, and what are they good at? Changing the rate, negotiating the rate. So every single payer we have has a different rate. And we have some payers, I won't say them out loud, we literally lose money. At this point, we take all payers. There will be a day when all nursing homes will have to make tough choices and say, that card in your pocket, sorry, I can't take that. That is just too low of a rate. So anywhere from $175 a day to $475 a day. That is an unusual, I guess, like running a hotel. Very confusing to know what the rates are. Yes, Mike.
I just read the paper like a week ago that some of the long-term care providers are pulling out of the market, major ones.
Insurers?
Yeah, saying, we've forecasted wrong, we're losing our, hind end on this, and we're just getting out of this. I mean, seeing your numbers, it makes all the sense in the world.
Uncomfortable. You could look at it as an open market. He's talking about insurers that sell long-term care insurance. And he said he read an article about the fact that they're retreating or pulling back from this marketplace. So is anybody, an agent in here that sells long-term care insurance? You might be better at answering this than me. So I'll give you my answer, and if I'm wrong, Phil, come up and just tell me I'm wrong. But I think we've gone from maybe 40 companies that sold long-term care insurance some 20 years ago. I think we're down to less than 5. Doesn't mean that if you are one of those companies that stop selling that your policy is not still good. What it means is they are not selling new insurance. They're not currently in the market. So it shouldn't put you in wigging you out or anything. But I will tell you that they have the right to change premiums. Every long-term care policy has the right to change premiums. And I'm reading about that in the Wall Street constantly, about the fact that they're adding 10%, 20% to premiums. Why is it that insurers are pulling back, or why is it that they're raising premiums? Is it because these numbers are unpredictable? No, they're absolutely predictable. We know how old America is going to get. We know the benefits they're going to need. We know the need for long-term care. You know what's unpredictable? Federal policy. You see, they wrap themselves around Medicare and Medicaid. But as we play with those benefit packages, consider extending the age from 65 to 66 or reducing care, perhaps, dare I say this out loud, but there's an increasing discussion about, as you get older, are you allowed to get that new hip or that new knee? You know, how are we going to solve this problem in America? Those topics have come up. Well, all that political unrest has made the insurers very wiggy. They're going, I don't know what America's going to do, and we might end up holding the bag. They cover us when the federal program doesn't. So I would tell you it has much to do with our political unrest as it does about the predictability of the numbers. An actuary probably could tell you everything that's on that chart. Is that a good answer for the rest of y'all that sell this stuff?
One thing I would add is that there are insurance carriers now who are being more innovative. The ones you talked about that can increase the premiums, those are the traditional long-term care policies. You may have that policy 30, 40 years before you need to use it.
Yes.
They can change that premium anytime they want.
Right.
There are companies now where you pay a lot more upfront, and it covers you, and it's locked, and it can increase. You can pay it all in 10 years if you want. You can get your money back if you ever change your mind. So there are more innovative programs through the carriers, and maybe the internal expense of the insurance is a little higher, but you're getting a lot more flexibility.
I think this is real. The numbers I put up here for you are real. That's what I bought. In case you all are wondering what a guy like me would do who knows the industry well, I bought a 10-year policy, which means I'm paying premiums for my wife and I for the last 10 years of my career. On my 65th birthday, I will discontinue making premiums because it will be fully paid. At that point, they cannot change my rates and they cannot change my policy. But as long as you're in one of those previous policies you paid all of your life, I choose to shrink it down. Now, I will tell you, it ain't cheap. It's expensive. But I look at it as ensuring my retirement nest egg. So I hope my wife can outlive me. That would be great for her. I've got a nest egg designed for us together. But if I were to come down with the disease and have to move into First Community Village's memory care unit at the cost of $80,000 a year, and I needed that for 3 or 4 years, that's going to eat a gigantic hole in my retirement plan for her. So I look at the policy, the money that I spent for that, as ensuring my retirement. So all the money there won't be touched, that I've actually made a good plan for my wife or for me if she predeceases me. And I have this separate nest egg that's dealing with long-term care. Now, I didn't buy enough to absolutely ensure myself that I could never spend my savings, but I believe I've covered 90% of the issue. Any more? Yeah?
Well, tagging back onto that comment is, the problem is they don't want to publish the risk on their balance sheet. The stock market doesn't like it.
Referring to the insurers?
The insurers look ugly. So what we've seen is the opportunity to combine products.
Yeah.
And
a little bit of life insurance, a little bit of long-term care kind of mixed in there.
And a little annuity in there. And
a little bit of shimmy-shammy and make it happen, huh? I don't know how it works.
Hide it behind the curtain, but it does. It puts more money behind the product and covers the risk for the insurance company. And at the same time may well limit how many years of benefits you receive. As your graph showed, 80% of the people, their long-term incident ends in 4 years.
Yes, it's not a long period of time, right? At the most maximum cost, that's $90,000 a year for 4 years. That's the worst hit you could have. And I would tell you, that's the kind of number that if you have the resources to set it, I will leave you with one thought. We consider ourselves innovators. We consider ourselves educators and advocacy people. And I would ask, There's not a more important topic to talk about with your legislators and in your community. What are we doing about long-term care as this aging tsunami hits America? What are we doing? Are we all putting our head in the sand? And I would ask you to have that engaged in that discussion. Invite me to come speak. I'll talk to you. So would everybody on our team here would love to come jump on and talk about that. It's a big deal. Let's not hide our heads in America. Let's solve it. Thank you.
Mark, thank you for coming and speaking to us. This is a gift from us, from Argo and Laney, actually. And very interesting information. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Please join us next week to hear Kathy Gadderdam give highlights on Youth Exchange Program. Thank you.